You may have heard the story about Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Scheller, who is speaking out about what's going on in Afghanistan and demanding accountability for the disaster. Well, the news over the past weekend was that he was relieved of duties. We're now hearing that he will be resigning his commission. And even creepier still, there are implications the government is going to go after him for his mental health. Cernovich calls this like the Stalinist approach. So we'll take a look at all this. But let's just get started with the news for those that may not have seen it, because I think this is extremely important. And we do have more information on what's happening with Afghanistan and why this lieutenant colonel is correct and should be applauded for speaking up. Now, there are some considerations here. You know, we need a cohesive and unified armed forces. If people start speaking up in criticism, it will absolutely be used by our enemies. And of course, China is using it already. The problem is, though, when you have a failed and fractured administration, weak leadership like Mark Milley and his white rage complaints, someone needs to speak up. Otherwise, it just falls apart. What are we going to do? Ignore the problems until it's too late? No. They may see, China may seize on this, but I respect this man for speaking up. The story from timcast.com. Marine says he was relieved of duty over viral video calling for military leaders to be held accountable for Kabul attack. Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Scheller says that he was relieved of duty over his viral video calling for, over the deaths of these Marines and servicemen. Scheller says that he knew one of the Marines who died in the attack by ISIS-K. In the viral video, Lieutenant Colonel Scheller said that people are upset because senior leaders let them down, and none of them are raising their hands and accepting accountability or saying we messed this up. Quote, "Did any of you throw your rank on the table and say, hey, it's a bad idea to evacuate Bagram Airfield, a strategic airbase, before we evacuate everyone? Did anyone do that? And when you didn't think to do that, did anyone raise their hand and say we completely messed this up?" He asked. Potentially all those people did die in vain if we don't have senior leaders that own up and raise their hand and say, we did not do this well in the end. Scheller, battalion commander for the Advanced Infantry Training Battalion, went on to say, without that, the higher military ranks are not holding up to their end of the bargain. I want to say this very strongly. I have been fighting for 17 years. I'm willing to throw it all away to say to my senior leaders, I demand accountability. On Friday, the officer announced that he had been relieved of duty because of the video, but stated that he understood and respected the decision. Quote, "To all my friends across the social networks, I've been relieved for cause based on a lack of trust and confidence as of 14:30 today. My chain of command is doing exactly what I would do if I were in their shoes. I appreciate the opportunities AITB command provided to all the news agencies asking for interviews. I will not be making any statements other than what's on my social platforms until I exit the Marine Corps." Scheller says that he has served for 17 years and is looking forward to what will come next for him. Well, the latest news we have from just the other day is that he has announced, I'm resigning my commission. I would absolutely love to have Stu Scheller on Timcast IRL whenever he is available to speak. Once he's out of the Marine Corps, that would be great. A Marine officer who filmed, and I can only assume that we probably disagree on a lot of things, but these are important conversations, especially when you have brave men and women, absolutely brave men and women who serve in the armed forces, willing to speak up and speak about what's happening. I think we need to hear their thoughts and opinions based on their experience with Iraq and Afghanistan. Regardless of what they served there, I think the opinions of the people who are actually serving are weighted more heavily than people like me, for sure. So that'd be fantastic. They're going to say, Lieutenant Colonel Stu Scheller was dismissed Friday from command on the Advanced Infantry Training Battalion at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, over the original video. In the new one, he claims he is not currently under investigation and that he likely would be allowed to ride out his remaining 3 years until retirement if he chose to stay silent. I don't think that's the path I'm on, he says in the video. Shot inside an abandoned school bus in eastern North Carolina. I'm resigning my commission as a United States Marine effective now, and I am forfeiting my retirement, all entitlements. I don't want a single dollar. Wow, man. Bravo. Absolutely, bravo. With respect, that's a lot to give up. Absolutely. He then suggests that senior military leaders would need the money for jobs and security after what he intends to do, though he does not provide further details. Oof. The Marine Corps is taking appropriate actions to ensure the safety and well-being of Lieutenant Colonel Scheller and his family. The service spokesman, Captain Sam Stevenson, said in an email statement, as this is a developing situation, we cannot comment further at this time. I really want you to stop and think about what they just said. they're taking appropriate action to ensure the safety and well-being of Scheller and his family. Interesting. In this tweet, Paul McCleary says, USMC says tonight they're taking appropriate action to ensure the safety and well-being of Lieutenant Colonel Scheller and his family, indicating concern over his mental health. Perhaps that's just, I don't know, maybe shooting from the knee. We'll see. But I kind of agree with that. It sounds like they're going after his state of mind. Cernovich says this is how Stalin did it. If you dissent from the regime, scientists declare you insane and incarcerate you for your own protection. This is creepy stuff. They say the nearly 5-minute clip, viewed about 1 million times on Facebook and LinkedIn combined as of Sunday, and touched a nerve within the military and veterans community. Some have praised his courage to challenge the brass at the risk of his career. Others criticized him for grandstanding or sowing dissent. Blatantly using rank does cross a line, said Jim Golby, a 20-year Army veteran and adjunct senior fellow at the Center for a New American Security who focuses on civil-military relations. A battalion commander, quote, just doesn't have all the info that senior military or civilian leaders do. I can respect that to an extent. You know, I'll say it of myself. You, I, and all these other civilians and people watching on the news think we know what's going on. We got no idea. The stuff coming out from the press is probably a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of what's really going on. And you've got all these different interests trying to sow doubt and dissent and confusion. It is very, very difficult. We do our best, though. We want to criticize what we think is wrong when it is wrong. And while this man may not have all the information, I think when you look at the abandoning of Bagram Air Force Base, you better justify something like that. And they didn't. Mark Milley just said, well, I was told to guard the embassy. There it is. Look, I understand the idea of classified information, but you can at least try to justify it, right? Unless they want us to be mad at them, which to me is absolutely crazy. And I'll tell you, we got some news that will light a fire under all of you. It is going to infuriate you. Something I've been talking about. We'll read a little bit more. They say Golby hoped someone would convince Scheller to seek mental health treatment and get out of the spotlight quickly. I find it very sad and misguided. There it is. How dare you speak out against us, even when they fail. You know what they say? Snitches get stitches. In this case, snitches get sent to the psych ward. It's not clear what the new consequences, what new consequences he could face. But Golby said the Corps will need to be careful not to cement him as a martyr among those who would use him divisively. He's been celebrated by some on the right to further demonize, quote, to further demonize my husband and justify the vitriol he endured. Rachel Vindman, wife of Army Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, said in a tweet Sunday. This is amazing. One person tweeted, what Jim said, he can be misguided, derelict Marine, and still need our compassion. We are better than our enemies. Rachel Vindman said, I like you and I like Jim, so I'll sit this one out. Because he has been celebrated by the crazies who are using it as an opportunity to further demonize my husband and justify the vitriol he endured. Once wasn't enough for him. He had to lean in all the way. Let me just slow down for a second. Donald Trump made a phone call about legitimate concerns Americans had pertaining to Ukraine. Real concerns that journalist Matt Taibbi I shouldn't say his reporting, in my opinion, justifies. And this is all related to Burisma, Joe Biden's son being on the board of a company had no business being on. I get it. That's all opinion, but it's my opinion, and I think it's yours and many others, and we're allowed to have them. Joe Biden's son has no business being on the board of a Ukrainian energy company. Not to mention, there were numerous investigations, and regardless of what you think about all of these investigations, Joe Biden went to Ukraine and said, if you don't fire the prosecutor, you don't get the money. Quid pro quo. And Vindman comes out, and he complains about this, and we're supposed to act like that's heroic. Bro, you may have just stopped a legitimate corruption investigation. Who are you? Now, as for Scheller, yes, please, by all means, criticize the man. He even said that when it came to the reaction to relieve him of duty, he would have done the same thing. Because we recognize there are certain reasons why we have these policy positions in place. But to compare yourself or your husband to a man who's angry that 13 U.S. Troops had, I think it's 14 now, actually, it may have gone up, maybe even 15, that these people have lost their lives is so dramatically different from Donald Trump calling and saying, we need to look into this. What was that all about? They blew that out of proportion, impeached Trump, and failed to convict. Why? Because it was bull crap. Because Donald Trump had a legitimate concern. A video went viral. In the video, Joe Biden says, if you don't fire the prosecutor, you don't get the money. And they accused Trump of the quid pro quo. Even when Sondland testified, Trump told me, I don't want anything. I don't want a quid pro quo. They still claimed it. And I think it was CBS. I have the Instagram post where they're like, Sondland confirms it because in his opinion, it felt like one, even though Trump said no. That's the dirty game they play. How dare you compare yourself to someone who's speaking out about the failures that resulted in 13, 14 maybe dead service members? Not the same thing. Now, I don't think, Vindman deserves all of this like mudslinging and threats and all that stuff. Absolutely not. I mean, if the dude thought he was doing something good, by all means. I don't. I think he was misguided and anti-Trump, and so he just threw whatever he could. And I think it was a huge blunder. But we should be nicer to people. That's fair. But don't compare yourself to someone who's criticizing the death of service members. Why? Let me show you this from the Politico. Pentagon prepared for mass casualty attack at Kabul airport hours before explosion. Detailed notes of 3 classified calls provided to Politico show top Pentagon officials knew of imminent threat but struggled to close Abbey Gate. This one makes me angry. Makes me angry, my friends. Let me read. You got to hear this. Just 24 hours before a suicide bomber detonated an explosive outside Hamid Karzai International Airport, senior military leaders gathered for the Pentagon's daily morning update on the deteriorating situation in Afghanistan. Speaking from a secure video conference room on the 3rd floor of the Pentagon at 8 a.m., Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin instructed more than a dozen of the department's top leaders around the world to make preparations for an imminent mass casualty event, according to classified detailed notes of the gathering shared with Politico. During the meeting, General Mark Milley, the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, warned of significant intelligence indicating that the Islamic State's Afghanistan affiliate was planning a complex attack. The notes quoted him as saying, commanders calling in from Kabul relayed the Abbey Gate, where American citizens had been told to gather in order to gain entrance to the airport, was the highest risk, and detailed their plans to protect the airport. I don't believe people get the incredible amount of risk on the ground, Austin said, according to the classified notes. On a separate call at 4 that afternoon, or 12:30 a.m. in Kabul, the commanders detailed a plan to close Abbey Gate by Thursday afternoon, Kabul time. But the Americans decided to keep the gate open longer than they wanted in order to allow their British allies, who had accelerated their withdrawal timeline, to continue evacuating their personnel based at the nearby Barron Hotel. American troops were still processing entrance at the airport at Abbey Gate at roughly 6 p.m. in Kabul when a suicide bomber detonated his explosive vest there, killing nearly 200 people, including 13 U.S. service members. They could have shut it down. They didn't shut it down. They knew this was going to happen. They had the intelligence. Why? The Americans were told to stay away. So now we're learning, but with British allies. I respect the Brits. I want them and the Afghan allies to be saved. But you tell the Americans, back off. Something bad's going to go down. And then I think this is hilarious. I don't mean in like a good way. I think it's like, it's absurd to the max. We tell the Brits, don't worry, you can come on in. We tell our Afghan allies, oh, it's fine, come on in. We know there's going to be an attack. We could shut it down right now. No, we're going to leave it open. And what happened? Exactly what they knew was going to happen. Exactly what they knew was going to happen. I shouldn't be doing a segment on this. I should be talking about something dumb. Some stupid culture war nonsense. I should be talking about, this Democrat did this, that, or otherwise. How about that? But this is the news that we get. In the week before the attack, Joe Biden and top administration officials repeatedly spoke in public about the general threat ISIS posed to the airport. Biden even cited that threat as a reason not to extend the military mission beyond the 31st. The president warned this weekend that an additional ISIS attack was highly likely, so we may see more. This account of the internal conversations among top Pentagon leaders in the hours leading up to the attack at the airport is based on classified notes from 3 separate calls provided to Politico and interviews with 2 defense officials with direct knowledge of the calls. Politico is withholding information from the Pentagon readouts that could affect ongoing military operations at Kabul airport. The transcript of these 3 conference calls, authenticated by a defense official, details conversations among the highest levels of Pentagon leadership. It makes clear that top officials were raising alarm bells and preparing for a potential attack that they had narrowed down to a handful of possible targets in a 24 to 48 hour time frame. Projections that ended up being deadly accurate, and they kept our troops standing there. You want to know why I'm really, really mad? Look, I heard it all my life. The troops are heroes and don't blame the troops and all that stuff. And I'm like, I get it. But you know what the reality of this is? I get it. We respect the troops. But we're talking about brave, responsible, disciplined young people. We're talking about expecting fathers and mothers. Well, not mothers, but expecting fathers, right? I don't believe the women who were there were currently pregnant. But I believe at least one of the troops had recently become a father, or there was someone who was about to be a father. These are young people, our best and our brightest, who should be leading this nation with their experience. And the top brass, the bureaucrats, the woke narcissists like Millie, they keep the best of the best in the most dangerous places. And that infuriates me because I'm worried about where we go if we keep things like this up. I am worried about what this means. This is nasty stuff. That's why what Scheller has done, speaking up, is just, he's spot on. You know, I'm not going to pretend to have classified information. But here's a guy who says, I'm going to risk everything. I'm going to resign and give up everything to speak out. And I hope he succeeds from it. Because we need more people to be brave. Take a look at what happens with Project Veritas when people come out and blow the whistle. They blow the whistle, and then James will launch a fundraiser for them, often netting them a large sum of money to help keep them well-fed, protected, and secure in their person, in their lives, after taking such a huge risk. Now, this guy Scheller is speaking up, calling out the top brass, and knowing it's ending his career. So I hope he succeeds from it. Oh, of course, the left will just call it a grift. See, he knew he could make money. You would give up your career? Now, we're talking about a career where you're passionate about, where you've dedicated 17 years of your life, and you could end up making a substantial sum of money staying in that career. No, it's a great risk, a serious risk. There are many people who have blown the whistle or spoken up at their work, and now they're in the gutter. Nowhere to be found. People forgot about them. Don't care. It is dangerous to yourself to take a risk and speak up, but you got to be brave. Because if everyone stood up and spoke out, if everybody who saw some kind of malfeasance or corporate corruption went to Project Veritas and said, this is criminal, this is unethical, within the law, I'm not saying give up classified stuff, I think the world would be a better place. I think the only reason we have this broken and corrupt system with the military operating the way it does with these failures of Afghanistan is because people don't speak up and speak out. And it's because the people know that if they fail, they'll fail up. Nobody wants to call anybody out because no one wants to put themselves at risk. There is no cohesive structure by which we operate anymore. People are just saying, you know what? It's bad. But if I rock the boat, then I won't get a promotion. So how about that? You see what happens? This dude, for doing the right thing, loses everything. Shouldn't it be the opposite? Shouldn't you be rewarded for doing the right thing? It's tough. I'm not going to pretend like it's cut and dry. I mean, this guy speaks out, and it can cause problems. I mean, check this out. China seizes on Stuart Scheller firing as evidence of U.S. military's low morale. I don't know if that matters. Do we really care what China thinks? No. I mean, we want our military to be stronger and have good morale, but I'll tell you this, if anything's weakened the morale of the U.S. military, it's Joe Biden. Chinese state media claimed the firing of Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Scheller is evidence of increasingly low morale in the U.S. military. They want to mention, what Scheller posted. We know this. The Global Times, which is Chinese state propaganda, said, Scheller's dismissal indicates that U.S. military leadership is unwilling to listen to any suggestions or dissatisfaction, nor willing to admit or correct any of their strategic mistakes. Instead, they spare no efforts to shun their responsibility. This will inevitably bring more disasters. You know what's funny? Lu Shu wrote, he's right. Just because it's Chinese propaganda doesn't mean it's wrong. It means that they're going to try and just highlight all of the worst possible things about the U.S. Are they going to talk bad about China? What about when someone in the Chinese Communist Party speaks up? What about Jack Ma? Oh, he's gone. They stripped him of his wealth and access and resources. Yeah, we get it. You're going to try and pretend like you're better. No, we'll call you out, China. We get it. But the reality is, it doesn't mean it's wrong. It doesn't mean he's wrong. I believe that U.S. military leadership is unwilling. Look, I've not served in the military. I know many people, and it really does seem like it's got problems with people not wanting to rock the boat. And if you won't rock the boat, then, I mean, sometimes the boat rocks when you kick someone off it. You're sitting there about to take off from shore, and there's somebody you know is causing serious problems, and you're just like, yeah, but throwing him off would rock the boat. People will get mad about that, so we'll leave him. Then he sinks the boat. You got to get him off the boat. It's that simple. Now we got China making fun of us. Come on. He said, it signals that senior leaders attach little significance to the safety of these lower-ranked officers and soldiers, as the latter will continue to face more threats. Liu wrote that the misjudgments of top U.S. military commanders will result in troops' low morale in carrying out the mission. The writer argued that America's debacle in Afghanistan will make more U.S. soldiers and lower-ranked officers realize the folly of military leadership. I agree. I think China's awful. And I think just because they're a bad person doesn't mean that their point is wrong. We see that they knew about this. And they said, keep the troops down there. Who cares? I'm sure that's a little cold. I'm sure they were like, well, it would be really bad if something bad happens to them. But they knew it was coming. They told Americans to stay away. They decided to keep the gate open longer than they were supposed to. If they had closed the gate as per planned, they'd still be able to reopen later. Maybe the attack wouldn't have even happened. But I'll tell you one thing. These service members would be alive. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at youtube.com/Timcast. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.